Welcome back to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. We hope you've had a wonderful Thanksgiving and that the food coma is worn off. Matt is back at it this week with Halina Radchenko, a personal injury trial attorney from New York City's Hach and Rose law firm. Last year, Matt and Halina presented a continuing legal education class to the New York State Trial Lawyers Association. They discuss how they put it together and give you some tips on topics to cover. This is a great way to get face-to-face time with lawyers and gives your business incredible credibility. Now let's begin and check out Halina's perspective of working with investigators. Now here's your host, private investigator, Matt Spare.
And welcome everybody to the next episode of PI Perspectives. I am super excited today to introduce my next guest, Miss Halina Radchenko of the law firm Hach and Rose in New York City. I have known Halina for many, many, many years, and I asked her to come in today to chat with us because Halina and I last year put on a program for the New York State Trial Lawyers Association. We had done a continuing education course, and I wanted to talk today on how an investigator would actually go about setting up one of those programs and what's important to remember when you're making a proposal to actually do it. It's a great tool to grow your business, getting you exposure to personal injury attorneys and coming across as an expert. Halina's firm actually is a personal injury firm in New York City called Hach and Rose. And welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to share my knowledge with you guys.
Okay, great. Awesome. So, like I said, I've known Halina for many years and we've done business together. In fact, we were doing business together when she was a sole practitioner. That's how we first met.
That's true. So I worked for a man named Richard Wright when I was first out of law school. He promised me trial experience, and it's all I ever wanted. So I instantly graduated, went to work for this small solo practitioner. He sent me to court the first day out of law school, and I went back to court day in and day out for about two and a half years. And then I said I can do it on my own. And I opened up my own solo office in Brooklyn. Well, I had a partner. It was called Radchencko in Rothenburg. And then I decided that I wanted to be part of a bigger law firm with bigger cases, handling bigger trials, and having more support than I did as a solo. And so I came off counsel to Hach and Rose, and I've stayed ever since, and I probably will till the end of my days because I love them. It's a great place.
It's a great firm. Yeah, great firm. I do a lot of business with these guys. And, there's something to be said about a firm that treats their employees like really well. And one of the things that impressed me was just the way that Mike and Greg treat their employees. I thought was really, really awesome. So not only are you an attorney, you're also part of the New York State Trial Lawyers Association, correct?
I am an officer. I am the second vice president of the New York State Trial Lawyers Association. From very early on in my law career, even in law school, I decided that lobbying legislature and telling the stories of my clients and for a greater global good, meaning we would use these stories to turn around and help politicians frame laws so they can take into account the mishaps or all of the problems that I would have had in my prior cases if there was a finagle with the law.
Right.
And they could change that and they can make it better and they can benefit all of us. So because I've always been of that mindset, probably 3 to 4 years out of law school, I joined the New York State Trial Lawyers Association. I was a member for a couple of years, jumped on the board of directors, and then jumped into being an officer. And I think 4 years later now,
you're holding up second VP, right?
Yeah, up the ranks, and now I'm the second VP. Very excited about that. Love the work that I do with NISLA.
Yeah, it's very rewarding to be able to give back to the state that you work in. And the New York State Trial Lawyers Association, they are really all about advocacy and protecting the rights of other attorneys to help their clients. There's so much back-end stuff that goes on that people have no idea. And what I always was so impressed about when you handle the role of being president of that association is you essentially step away from your law practice for a year, right?
Yes. So if and when I am called on to become president, I will step away from the practice for a whole year, and I will dedicate my life to pretty much representing the victims of New York State, going out there, testifying before Congress, explaining the situation my clients are in. But you're right. It feels so good to give back because it's not all about just being an attorney. It's about making the system better for the people that you represent for them. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So definitely investigators have these types of associations too. Like in New York State, it's the Associated Licensed Detectives of New York State, the same premise, right? So we have lobbyists up in Albany, that protect and advocate for investigators. So if you are an investigator, I encourage you to seek out your state association. And, the National Council for Investigative and Security Services works on this concept basically throughout the country. So it's another great organization. If you're not a member of it, I suggest you take a look. NCISS.com is the website that you would want to take a look and check that out.
But let me just jump in here for
Sure.
1 second. And since we're on topic of how, lawyers and investigators work with one another, I know you're a member of the New York State Trial Lawyer Association, and whatever state investigator that you're in, you will have the State Trial Lawyer Association in that state. I know there's a California one, there's one in Texas, and if you become a member of that organization as well, it's the great stepping point to liaison with attorneys
Right.
in order to find your way to get a CLE or whatever it is you want to do.
That's how we kind of found ourselves doing this program together. That's a really good point. I joined as a partner for justice with NISLA, and basically what that means is I'm not an attorney, obviously, but I support the cause. And by supporting the cause, it gave me access to getting in front of these attorneys, so getting invited to the events that they go to. I covered this a lot in my networking episode, so if you haven't listened to it, go back and check it out. So just talking about that and really being creative with how you do your marketing and really finding your target audience. By attending these events and essentially having that person-to-person contact and the testimonials, really, really important, helped me grow my business. And it helped Halina and I actually put a program together. What we did was we decided we wanted to speak to attorneys that were just starting off. Somebody who was just getting into either their own practice, breaking off from another law firm, or they were just getting out of law school and really didn't know the proper procedures of how to litigate, right?
Right. So I was the chair of the New Lawyer Association. We decided to call it new because it doesn't matter how old you are. First, for a while, we called it the Young Lawyers Association, but then none of us are so young anymore. And new attorneys or people that come into the profession really need to figure out how to practice law. So myself and my co-chair decided to put on a program teaching new attorneys the practice of law, like really what happens in New York State courthouses. And when we talked about it, we decided to start at the intake phase. And Matt was my go-to guy at intake, right? Like if I had any difficult case, like I had to go look at a defect, I had to sign up a car accident, anything I had to do, Matt was on my cell phone. You'd give him a call and you'd say, all right, Matt, I need help here. And he would help me.
Yeah. So basically, just to clarify that, so the intake is when somebody solicits an attorney. So if they go on a website and they interview the attorney and decide that they'd like the attorney to represent them, what the attorney would call the investigator to go out and meet with the people at their homes, have them sign the necessary paperwork, and then follow up and do all the investigative work that's involved with that. So Halina and I had talked about putting together this program for the new lawyers.
New lawyers.
New lawyers, yeah. So not young, just new. And in order to do that, I needed an attorney to actually sponsor. So it wasn't something like, hey, Matt's a great guy. He's going to go talk to all these attorneys and we're going to give you, CLE credits for it. No, there needed to be attorneys involved in it, and the program needed to be vetted.
Right. So NISLA has the deans of NISLE, which is the CLE portion of NISLA, or the New York State Trial Lawyer Association. And so you would have to pitch it to the deans. And one of the things I said was that when Matt comes here, and it really wasn't so much as for a marketing technique, it was more for education.
No, it was really strictly education. I can tell you I got very little business out of that night, but it was very cool to be a part of it.
Right. Like it wasn't, and that was like a really big deal for it because the CLE, it's not about business, it's about educating lawyers. And
Correct.
I said it's imperative to have an investigator work with you because, for example, we have the sidewalk law in New York City, and whatever state you're in, I'm sure you have a sidewalk law. So if there's a hole in a sidewalk, there's certain things you're going to have to prove in order to win your case. One of those things is the dimensions of that hole. And I am no expert in, the law in 50 states, but I can tell you if you got a hole in a sidewalk and you're a lawyer, you need to tell me how deep that hole is, how wide it is, how big it is, where it is. And where it is important because you could be, 5 feet from a light post, 4 feet from the curb, 2 feet from the storefront. All of these things have to be solidified in a diagram or a map or something because you're going to be asked about them. You're going to have to prove them to jurors. You're going to have to do things with these facts.
Right.
And so you need to put someone out there who knows how to measure a hole.
Yeah, somebody who knows where north is, where south is, east and west, really important.
Sounds so simple, but it really truly is not.
So I'm going to segue to just a little story of some work I did probably about 12 years ago. So I had a new client that hired me to go fix a notice of claim issue, meaning that they had sent an investigator out there and something just didn't look right to the attorney. So he's like, I'm going to hire you. I want you to come in and go take a look. So I had the paperwork from the other investigator, and I went out there, and I'm out at site, and I'm like, something doesn't look right? And this was before the time where you had compasses on your actual phone, right? They didn't have that app yet; it didn't exist. So I was like, man, I think this guy has his directions wrong. Just looking where the sun was in the sky, I think he's got it backwards. And I literally traveled to a hardware store. I bought a compass. I came back because it was driving me crazy. I was like, I know this is wrong, and sure enough, the information the investigator gave the attorney was backwards. And that's a big deal because the case could get thrown out.
Oh, it's a huge deal on these little technicalities. Like, you don't know how deep that hole is, case is gone. You might not know how big the lip goes off the floor, meaning an inch or 2 inch. That makes everything. If you have a lip in the state of New York that goes a half an inch, that's going to be a minor defect. An inch, all of a sudden you got a thing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's measuring a hole makes every difference in your litigation. And when you're a young attorney like I was, going out on their own, not understanding these things and getting into trouble in cases, being like, wow, that hole wasn't measured properly. Right. On the second case, you won't make that mistake again. So you go to someone who knows what they're doing, or someone who wants to learn what they're doing.
Sure.
So even if you're not someone who's crazy experienced in the industry of investigation, but let's say you'll work with an older lawyer and you're like, all right, I'll charge you a little less, but you're going to come out with me and show me how to measure a hole. That is invaluable business knowledge that you need. So it's important to find those kinds of...
It is important, and always know how you're going to lose your case is really important, right? You say you get beat on it once, you won't get beat on it again.
That's the most important. That's how you become better.
Yeah.
You lose, and then you'll never forget.
Yeah, and knowing how you lose and knowing how to mitigate that problem is good too. So one of the things that I talk about, and it'll be coming up on a podcast actually in the next few weeks or so, it's 10 tips on how to take photographs for accident sites, which is also an article that I wrote is coming out in PI Magazine in the next issue. So one of the things we talk about is how to use the proper ruler and taking the same photos with that ruler and without, in the event that that photo gets thrown out of evidence because the attorney can't examine the ruler, and how do they know that ruler is proper and all that stuff. So always having backup and making sure that's covered. Getting back to the CLE, having a relationship with an attorney that you trust, you have a good relationship that trusts you and just understands, that you know what you're doing, and creating that curriculum to then put forth to the right people to get that approval to get it done. So
that's like super important. For example, we just recently worked on a case that's coming up for trial. Me and Matt did together, and a witness broke. And this is like Columbo. I actually, this is why I love the law. So I've been working on the case for about 3.5 years. It's a fall down a stairway. And all of a sudden, my client calls me up and says, there's this woman who lives on the floor above me. She came downstairs and she fell on the same staircase I did 1.5 years before my fall. Now, if you're a lawyer, you know what that means. That means notice. That means an entire slew of things that just developed in your case to make you win that much easier and that much better upon a trial of the action. So I go to, Michael Rose, the partner at Hach and Rose, and I say, Mike, what do we do with this information? I mean, I knew what we do, but I obviously would love Mike's input. Mike is brilliant. And Mike says, call Matt and brief Matt and make sure Matt goes out himself. So this is a thing, all investigators have employees, but sometimes you want the person to go, aka Matt, because he knows the questions to ask. He knows how to get the information that we're seeking for the trial. He's done this with us enough times, and with other attorneys enough times, where he knows exactly what we need. So all I got to do tell Matt is that, this woman came forward with this information. Here's the background of the case. Matt, go do your thing. And I can trust that Matt asks the right questions.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Just having somebody who has that expertise in that area, knowing the right questions asked, knowing how to frame the questions to get the answer that you need is really important. And creating a comfort level. You would be surprised, just on your body language and your tone when you're speaking to somebody, how agreeable they could be to, the end goal that you're trying to get them to agree to sign a piece of paper that gives you the actual notice. Because I've come across situations where somebody has said, I'll say whatever you want, but I'm not putting it down on paper. We get that every now and then.
Right. We get that. We get that quite often with sometimes.
Yeah. And you got to have kids gloves and really, know how to approach that situation. And that is a skill that's not taught,
No, it's not. It's actually really difficult to make that comfort level. So I just thought of another one. I had a case, I still do, where a man trips and falls on a New York City sidewalk. And in New York, you need this notice, which we've talked about from the beginning of this, I guess, why New York City attorneys need great investigators. And we had a 311 phone call, and the email address of the person who put the 311 phone call in complaining of the defect where my client tripped and fell gave Matt the email address. And lo and behold, within like 2 days, I'm on the phone with a guy, and he's actually worked for a law firm in New York City. And he said, I've given them 40 complaints. I walk there every single day. This is ridiculous. That is my whole case.
Yeah.
And so Matt talked to him and made him feel super comfortable to come in for a deposition, which is the next step of it. Even if they'll give you that statement, they have to feel comfortable enough with their first point of contact to come in and give you the deposition.
Yeah, it's always it's
so
a challenge.
much harder.
It's a challenge. Yeah. And really the way you approach somebody with that is, you kind of say like, hey, it's about doing the right thing. And if you were injured, you would want somebody to do that too. But I remember that particular case, and this guy was so like Mr. Super Citizen. It was like so important to him that, those people that were accountable should be held responsible. And it was more of a social issue for him, that making sure that government does what it's supposed to do.
But he also had a job, and he also had to make money, and he couldn't take the day off. And I remember we had to really work with him to make it accommodating to him. And you made that process super streamlined. Like it was, he felt like this VIP coming in, as opposed, and he definitely wanted to be like the A-class citizen, but because he felt in so VIP phenomenal, like, he was that guy. Right. He was like, I'll come in, I'll get this done, this will be great.
Yeah, no, it was good.
It worked out really well.
I remember that one. And that's the thing, like, you never know what type of case you're going to work on, and you never know who you're going to be able to track down. Listen, I've had plenty of victories, but there are times that you fall short too. And it's a matter of doing due diligence and just, being able to say like, hey, this is how you do it. I can't guarantee the result, but I can guarantee that I'm going to do it the proper way. And
it's so important that you said that. It's funny, before we started this, we talked about this one case that I had where unfortunately the investigation didn't work out. So I had a client who was hit by a motor vehicle that fled the scene of the accident on this really weird intersection. Like the intersection didn't look right to me. And I gave it to you, and you said the same thing. The intersection does not look good to me.
This was like 5 points, think of like Gangs of New York, what it looked like downtown. And this is what that intersection looked like. It was
weird
all over the place.
In Brooklyn. Yeah. And, I ended up hiring an engineer who told me how to foil the past accidents, motor vehicle accidents that had happened in that location. And what the standard was for suing the city of New York or the state on improper intersection design. And it didn't pan out in this case. And I had to go back to my client and tell her such. It felt good to know that we exhausted every avenue. Yeah. And if I said to her, take my file to any lawyer in New York City, and not a single one of them will get you any other result, because I did everything I could for you.
And that's the thing, you have that responsibility to, make that investment in these cases. When you take a case in, like you have basically a fiduciary responsibility to do the investigative work. And I know I've said that before, and I'll continue to say it. And I think it's so important that sometimes you really have to just investigate it out and see what happens on this. What's funny is that case is a couple years old. I think it was about two years old. Right? We didn't have access to Vision Zero data. Now we have access to Vision Zero data. So what Vision Zero data is in New York is that database you wouldn't have to foil. You can actually look directly into it and get that intersection information. So, technology is always changing. What we could do 2 years ago, we can do so much more now. And, what we can do today, we might not be able to do tomorrow when things change.
And that was so important in the CLE that we were doing, in that, it was for new lawyers, many of whom were in the younger demographic. So I would say, 30 to 40 would be that demographic. Yeah,
there were a couple of people that were up there too.
They were new, but not as many. But regardless, what I was trying to say about that is that with the newer generation of attorneys, we are into data. We're into this, like, we understand that everyone takes a photo. Oh my God, accident happened. We can search Instagram or Twitter or whatever it is.
There's videos too. There's videos all over the place.
Video cameras all over the place. A million ways of recording our lives because we've grown up in it. But you take attorneys out of my age range, and I'll be glad to say it, I'm 38. You go into
get out of here. I thought you were 25. I'm out of here.
I wouldn't be a lawyer yet, but thank you. But you take the older attorneys, you take like 50 plus, and they need the information from their young investigators to tell them how to do it because they have no clue.
Yeah.
They have like no idea what technology can become. Like there was a story I read on Vice News or something, how the husband...
You read that, Reg? Just kidding.
Love Vice News. But you know, like the guy who went to jail for murder because his wife's iWatch caught her heartbeat like after he called her in dead. So I mean,
that's the Internet of Things, by the way.
Right.
I'm going to put another plug in here. Amber Schroeder, one of my former episodes, talks about this stuff. So go check it out.
No, that's phenomenal stuff because talking about the CLE portion of it and keeping on topic is that the younger attorneys will understand what you're saying and ask you almost like pertinent, cool questions and like lead this discussion. Yeah. When you're talking to attorneys, I'm so sorry, like 50 plus, you need to like dumb it down and explain it like you would to maybe my 4-year-old, although he may know more than them because technology is a new thing for lawyers.
So here's the challenge as an investigator trying to sell this stuff to attorneys. Those are the guys that make the decision on how the money is being spent. So it's so funny, like when I do my sales pitch and I'll go and I'll talk to some of the newer attorneys or the less seasoned folks, right? And they're all jazzed up and they're like, yes, we need this. This is perfect. Just go talk to so-and-so over here. And you go to so-and-so over there and he's scratching his head like, I don't know what this intertube thing is, but it sounds like, maybe some research needs to be done. Maybe you should go down there and pull the files and go through all the paperwork and all that. It's like, they don't even let you do that anymore. Like you literally have to do everything online. I couldn't even get an appointment down there to do that. And
there is no book.
Yeah, there's no book. The book doesn't exist. There's a reason that Big Apple like retired itself. So it's no,
but it's
there,
true. So. Like I'll never forget as a younger attorney, I stayed late one night and all the paralegals had left and there was a seasoned attorney in my practice and I love him to death. And I said to him, you just type up a snip. And he's like, well, I don't know how to type.
Yeah, it's crazy.
What do you mean? He goes, I dictate. And
oh, wow.
That blew my mind. But that exists in the lawyer world.
Sure, yeah, him and Don Draper. Like it doesn't exist anymore.
But they all still write on the yellow notepads and they like dictate to these magical secretaries. I don't even understand.
I still have nightmares over those yellow legal pads.
But that's something you have to understand that when you're pitching to an older firm, you need to understand that they have no clue, but that the technology is so important. Yeah. Because like, I don't know, I have to shout this out because this was so big in the lawyer world. We have in New York this notice of claim. So everyone's freaking out about the notice of claim, right? Because if you can get a notice of claim on the city of New York, you win your case. That's just on liability. You just do it. And Matt and this younger, was she an investigator or an attorney?
Investigator.
Yeah. They came up with a way to open source search notice of claim database from 311. And that blew my mind. Like he had told me that over dinner and I was like, oh, my world changed.
Yeah.
But then explained, like I ran to like certain people in NISLA and I'm like, do you know what just happened? They're like, what does that mean? Yeah. And I'm like, let me explain it to you. But this is like the biggest thing in the universe because to search, just to go on a little legal sideways, you have to demand from the city of New York all of their prior notices of claim. The city says, we don't have it. We've lost it. The rats ate it. Well, it's all on the internet in an open source database and you can search it. And the fact that Matt and this younger person came up with a way to search it was mind-boggling.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
So I'm going to jump in on that. So she's basically a coder programmer, right? Yeah. Another investigator. I had met her at an event for the certified fraud examiner. So she had given a presentation and we were chatting and I'm like, I don't know what we're going to do together, but we're going to do something together, right? And I met with her and I met with her boss and we kind of hit it off. And so the open data program is free data sets, right? What that means is the city will give you the information if you ask for it. However, they're sneaky. So they're going to give you PDFs. They're going to give you 20 million files of PDFs and say, here, we've given you the information you asked for. Good luck, right? So we were able to write a serpentine program that actually picks out the necessary information by not only by address, but also by geolocation. Because sometimes the way information is put into the system is incorrect. The person calling in is maybe giving the wrong direction or whatever, and the information, you're only going to get returned what the researcher is looking for. So part of the problem with the city when you do your FOIL is they will only give you what you ask for. They're not going to do the due diligence. They're not your friend. Nope. And they've got, honestly, thousands and thousands of requests, and it piles up. I just got a response to a FOIL I filed back in January, and it said, do you still need this? We're a little behind.
We get those all.
Right?
It'll take maybe 6 months to 12 months to get you your information.
Yeah. So this is now a month 10, and they're asking me if I still need it. And I'm like, yeah, I still need it. I needed it like 10 months ago. Right. So what we do is we're able to find the unique ID, the actual specific complaint that was filed, when they acknowledge they received it, and more importantly, when they went out and what they found when they went out, because that gets you over the notice issue of being able to actually use that information, right? It's not just making that call to 311. It's actually them acknowledging they received it and them going out and saying, yeah, there's a problem over here. We need to refer it to this agency or do whatever there. So that's the big game changer. And anytime you do this type of research, it takes time. And time equals money. So
it takes crazy time.
It's an expensive search, and
it takes time to figure out the records.
Yeah,
it's not even about the time waiting for these records. That's a whole nother thing. Yeah. I'm talking about like once you get them, and you're talking like 6 inches of records, 12 inches of records, like paper by paper.
You got
to go through it and understand what you're looking at too, because some of them are permits, some of them are gang. What are they called? Roving gang sheets. That's.
I don't know. That sounds dangerous.
that took me a 45-minute deposition as a new lawyer to figure out what a roving gang sheet was.
That sounds very dangerous. Just being able to understand that and know what to look for and pull it apart. And imagine getting a response from the city saying, we found no records, and then saying, well, no, wait a second. I show unique ID number, blah, 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 that on this particular date, can you please give me the right information now? So I think what happens a lot of times is it's either not specific enough when it's filed, or somebody just wants to clear something off their desk and just put it from column A to column B and just stamp it off and said, yeah, I took a look and there was nothing here. There was no way for you to do quality control on that. You're basically taking it at heart that whoever the city hires to do this research is actually doing their job. You don't know that.
And if you're a New York City lawyer and you're listening to this, if you don't FOIL the request on your own and you actually depend on the New York City records, I think you're committing malpractice. Like I really do at this point. One of the best things I got from the New York State Trial Lawyer Association, CLE, on municipality work is that you must FOIL the request. Like what you find in there and what the city provides you are not the same. And you have to make sure you're doing your due diligence to make sure that you're getting all of the records you're entitled to. Yeah,
and we're going to jump out of New York here. I think we're spending a little too much time in New York.
I'm a New York lawyer. Okay. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah. So whatever state you're in, whatever city you're in, it probably has some sort of similar setup. You want to make sure that you understand the process on how to get those records and, how to take it one step further and really do your due diligence. That makes you valuable to your attorney, right?
That's exactly right. And the more you know and the more you can educate your attorney as an expert, that's what really drives you as a business person. I have experts in other fields, engineers or whoever, and if I have a defect or a product that's gone haywire, I need that person to come in and explain to me why and how. Right. And those are the people I go back to use over and over again because they educate me and they make me a better lawyer in the fields that I know nothing about.
Right. If you're an investigator and you want to get into this field, working with personal injury attorneys, my suggestion to you would be obviously do business with them first. Second of all, go to their events. Support their events. Whatever face time you can get. If there's somebody running for political office and an attorney asks you to donate to that particular person, even though you may not really agree with what that person does, do some investigation and see what they're standing behind. But consider consider going to that event and supporting. It goes a really long way. I have some clients of mine that do a lot of nonprofit stuff. So they do fundraising for nonprofits, and there's certain nonprofit things that are very passionate to them, and being able just to support it goes a long way. Just showing up, being present, being a part of the state associations. There are some bar associations that actually let you join, not as an attorney, actually here in New York. So Putnam County, which is a little bit north of Westchester, I'm actually a member of that bar association. I'm not an attorney, but I'm actually a member of the bar association. It's funny.
So you get when CLEs comes out, you get when, their Christmas annual dinner dances.
I know when they're going to be, where they're going to be, right? Yeah, and I know when the judges are running for office. But
it's good to know. It's definitely good to make your presence there. You want to be friends. One of the best things you can do as business is work with your friends. Sure. So like Matt's a friend, and he has been for years and years. We share a lot of common interests other than, personal injury and investigation.
Yeah, we're foodies. We like sushi.
That's true.
Yeah.
But it's nice, it's nice to be like, hey, you want to do this investigation for me? And then we'll share the results over dinner in the city somewhere nice. But that's the whole point of it. You do want to work with your friends. You want to get to know people, and it makes it so much more comfortable and so much more better.
Yeah, and I had known you. I mean, I've known you for years, but even before I started working with the firm that you're at, I mean, that didn't happen overnight.
That took a very long time.
Yeah, and it wasn't a matter of like I was trying to get somebody thrown out or anything like that. It's just, every investigator has their specialty, something they're good at. And it's not a knock on the guy that was doing the work before, but I just have different relationships, and I was able to service your account better.
No, that's a true statement. I mean, like when you're merging, for example, I went from being a solo practitioner with all my own accounts into a bigger firm that had been around for many more years than I had. They had built relationships, solid relationships, and the people that were good to me, and you were good to me. I try to bring them in every niche that I could. And again, not to knock anybody that was there before you, really, because I felt comfortable with you. Yeah. Like I would have a more comfortable talk with you than anybody else. Like I could talk, I get you on your cell phone. I could text you. I could, see you for lunch or dinner, and I could can I say shoot shit? Is that allowed?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, like I could shoot shit with you, and that was the beauty of it. So then on my own cases, I'm like, hey, can I use Matt? Yeah. That'd be really great. And then so it
slowly but surely,
right? It's a big deal.
Yeah, and it's funny. You've said this a few times about answering the phone, and that's one of the things that really makes or breaks for an investigator in this industry too. Like making yourself available. I've taken over so many accounts from other investigators simply for the one reason that I answer my phone 24/7, 365. When it comes to personal injury cases, you got to work on this stuff like yesterday. And even on the new intakes, like you need to be at that person's house yesterday. So if you're not there, someone else is going to swoop in and grab that case.
With like a crew of every expert under your belt. Like when a big case calls in, and it's funny, that's the one comment I've gotten from so many cases that I've handled for Hach and Rose. I wouldn't have given Mike this case, but, I called on a Saturday at 4:30 p.m. He called me back in 15 minutes. Yeah. That's a thing.
Yeah. And that's the culture. So that culture starts in the law firm, but it also extends to the investigator. And we're a representation of the attorney and the type of work. And when I do this, sometimes I meet with people, I say, that quick service you just got? They're like, yeah, it was awesome. You were here. It doesn't end today.
No.
That's the way these guys work,
Right.
So I just got to make sure that when I'm saying that for the firm I'm working for, that it's really the case.
No, but that's the way it's, we live in an age today where your cell phone is an extension of you as a human. Yeah. It didn't happen in the 90s and the 80s, but it happens today. No one gets voicemail. Yeah. No one.
Yeah. I don't even know how to check my voicemail.
Right. Because if I
forget my password.
Because if I get your voicemail, I'll text you. Like, I'm like, hey, Matt, just got your voicemail. Really super need you. Bam, phone call back. Yeah. Like, that's what your clients expect. That's what today's generation is. Yeah. And it just has to be that way, or else you're not in competition with the cutting edge.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Satellite Investigations in New York City. Satellite Investigations is New York's leading investigation firm since 2005. Check out the newsletter archives for previous articles and publications. Matt is also available to be booked as a speaker for your association or conference events. You can visit their site at satellitepi.com. That's satellitepi.com for more details.
we're getting close to wrapping up here. So I just one more story here, not necessarily with Halina and I together, but more along the lines of your firm. So I had gotten a call from Mike Rose, your boss, and it was a huge case, major accident downtown, where a person had been killed, another person had been injured by a piece of a fire escape that was falling down. And Mike called me up. It was about 7:30, 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night. And he's like, it's a major accident. I need all the information you can get for me because I'm going to pitch the family tomorrow to hopefully have them sign a retainer with me. I was like, okay, I guess I'm working late tonight. Using some of the new technology that I have access to, the geofencing and geolocation, we were able to gather a significant amount of information for Mike. And in fact, he had his appointment the next morning at 11 o'clock, and he's meeting with the family. And I'm texting him like, hey, I just found 7 eyewitnesses, like direct eyewitnesses, which I had found through, I set up a geofence, started out with 10,000 posts. I kicked it down to 300 that were specifically about this accident to 7 direct eyewitnesses that we were able to find. So I made like $1 million. And I got to say, I was very impressed that the family did not sign the retainer right away, right? They had appointments set up with 3 other law firms. They wanted to meet with everybody, but they came back and they signed with you guys, I think. And Mike says the same thing because he showed up prepared, right? So you've got 3 or 4 law firms. They all got major verdicts, right? Everybody that they called, these were the big bangers in New York, right? The big trial lawyers that were there. But because their investigator did the initial work, Mike was able to go there and say, look, I've got 13, 14, 15 pages worth of work that we've done on this already, created that comfort level. And it helped him close the deal.
No, I agree with that 100%. I think that the competition in any state that you are in, I don't care if it's New York or California or Texas or Oklahoma, there's a lot of competition for the cases that we're looking after. And the more prepared you are, the more of an edge you will get. And no one can prepare you like your investigator, especially in the beginning like that. Yeah. You got to look at the news articles, the social media stuff that came up, hospital records. You actually work with former NYPD associates that can once in a while get not only that to data. Yeah, and it's where you source your resources. So like a good investigator, it's their relationships, right? Right. So I have some people that are retired law enforcement that aren't staff, but I have plenty of relationships with other law enforcement that aren't on staff. They're kind of like per diem when I need something. They know how to get that information. But that's such a big deal when you're looking for information because, like you just gave that example. But remember, I had a case where one of my clients got hit by a school bus, and the school bus fled the scene of the accident, and there was a big, giant criminal lawsuit as a result. Like the state pressed charges, and I needed your people to walk into the NYPD and talk to them, into the prosecutor's office, and they had much more pull than I ever would have. Yeah. So it's imperative to have those connections. It's crazy what happens when you show up to one of those places with a badge. Right. Of course. People say like, it doesn't exist. It exists. It exists. It really exists. And for me, like I was not law enforcement. Right? That wasn't the route that I went down. Me too. But I know people. And it's always good to know people, right? That's important. So we're going to wrap up here. So just thank you so much for having me. Thank you. My God, thank you. I'm so excited to be doing this. Yeah. This is so much fun. Yeah, this is great. We had talked about doing this for a while, and you're the first attorney that I've actually had on here. So, yay! To wrap up, closing here. Develop the relationships with your clients, and take it one step further. If you can get out there and do these type of programs, like doing a continuing education, it's good for everybody, right? So it's good for the people that you're talking to. It's good for you, for your business, to say like, hey, there's a little prestige behind it. I'm getting involved with this and doing this, and just, getting involved with your state associations, organizations like the Trial Lawyers Association or Al Denise in New York. Really important. That's how you set yourself above from the other competition. It sets you above the other people because when you listen to your clients, such as lawyers, and you listen to our CLEs and the things that we talk about and questions that come up, it makes you fine tune your product and hone it better for a sale, right? Yeah. Right? Because you know what we're looking for.
Yeah, I always get in trouble when I sponsor the Sealies because I sneak into the room. I always ask them, like, I never sponsor a Sealy that I don't want to sit in on, because to me, like, the construction ones are great.
They're great.
Labor laws change. Do you mind if I sit in there and just, I want to see what's going on, because it does make the investigator better at what they do, understanding how the rules are changing, the laws are changing.
Exactly.
So they're very nice to me down there. They let me do that every now and then. Don't tell anyone. Okay. Thank you so much for your time. That's a wrap here, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you real soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for hanging with us, Halina. It's great to see lawyers and investigators working together to create continuing education. Consider reaching out to a client you trust and explore the idea of building a class program for lawyers or private investigators. Next week, Matt checks in with Danny Guire from Prestige Security and Consulting in Long Island, New York. Danny, a retired New York City police officer, has extensive executive protection experience. Danny also works in the entertainment world and will discuss some of those challenges along with running security for a television studio and on movie sets. Now, please be sure to rate us 5 stars at Apple Podcasts, leave a comment or review, and share this episode with a friend. On behalf of Matt Spare, thanks for downloading and subscribing to PI Perspectives.